Good morning. It is Saturday, the eve of All Saints, or All Hallows, as it is also known. The 31st of October, 2020. Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. It was 503 years ago, on the eve of All Hallows, that Martin Luther demanded, insisted, invited the church to look at a new way of talking about God's activity among humans. One not based on what they had been doing, based on rules and laws and people who had to judge other human beings and paying money in exchange for a promise of forgiveness from God who was willing to offer it freely, a God who was slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. Why, demanded Father Luther of his church, the church in which he was ordained a priest, the church where he served a chair at a religious school, having his Doctor of Divinity and being the head of that school, the head professor of the theological school of Wittenberg, Germany, a monk of the Order of St. Augustine, and someone who possessed his letters of law degree also. A very smart man, but a very frustrated man, as he saw peasants spending money they could not afford, exchanging that for the privilege of touching what was claimed to be something that a holy person had touched or held or owned, or perhaps a lock of their hair or the bone from a finger. And that holy person lived such a special life that they got more holiness on their account than they needed to get into heaven. And by paying money, a portion of that excess holiness could be transferred to you or whoever you loved. This practice is an abomination, said Martin Luther. This practice results in money that is needed to build a decent church over the burial place of St. Peter, Jesus' chosen one, said the Pope. The Pope was the Pope. Luther was simply a priest who had taken a vow of obedience and had now broken it. Luther was given a choice. Publicly take back what you have said. There will be no debate. Publicly take back what you have said, and we will allow you to be forgiven. We may even let you keep your job. And Luther said, no, there must be a debate. I will not bow down to a church that sells forgiveness when Christ freely gave it, freely gave his life. And so he posted his complaints, his articles of debate on the church, the Castle Church in the city of Wittenberg, Germany, 503 years ago today, knowing that when people came to church on the festival of All Hallows, they would read his articles. And boy, did they. We didn't do a lot 3 years ago for the 500th anniversary. Some thought, well, most of the issues between the Catholics and the Lutherans were solved. The Pope this last week declared that persons who are attracted to other persons of the same gender are not, in fact, abnormal, unnatural, or an abomination. He did not say the church is ready to bless gay unions, but he said he acknowledged that society was right in doing so. Wow, 500 years. But the priests are still all male. The priests are not married. People must still go to a priest to be forgiven. Today, we remember the distinctions that caused Luther to declare himself a separate movement when he was kicked out. Tomorrow, by contrast, we remember that even though we are Lutheran, we are all still part of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That didn't change. The Lutheran movement within the church was to reform the church, and it still is. It's still reforming, and we need to reform ourselves too. But at all times, we need to remember the basics. How we talk about God matters. How we talk about God's activity with our brothers and sisters matters. The story of Exodus was a story about God's activity. And it's a wonderful story, and it's a horrible story. When I post these YouTube videos, I have to check a box that says, yes, this is for children, or no, this is not for children. And every time, for now the last 7 months that I've done these daily messages, I have always checked that box. No, this is not for children. It's not a children's story. And yet children figure prominently in today's story in a very, very tragic way. The 10th plague. After the 9th plague, Pharaoh says, "Get away from me. If I see your face again, you will die." So we don't expect Moses to appear before Pharaoh again. The last we heard, God had told the Israelites, go to the homes of your Egyptian neighbors and take their gold, their silver, their belongings, their amulets, their possessions, their jewelry. After the 9 plagues, they're afraid of you. They'll freely let you take it. They won't argue with you. Go and be ready to pack up yourselves. You're going on a trip. And now we get Moses talking to Pharaoh. It doesn't say Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, but it obviously is Moses talking to Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 11, verse 4. Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go through Egypt." Not tomorrow. Remember, each of the 9 plagues, Moses says tomorrow. And Pharaoh's thinking, okay, it didn't happen today. This time Moses says, tonight, midnight. Verse 5, every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn of the female slave, who is behind the handmill, and the firstborn of all the livestock. Then there will be a loud cry throughout the whole land of Egypt, such as never been or ever will be again. Remember what Pharaoh did to the Hebrews. Moses survived, the others did not. And now it comes back on him. Verse 7, but not a dog shall growl at any of the Israelites, not a people, not at animals, so that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Then all of these officials of yours shall come down to me and bow low to me, saying, leave us, you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will leave. And in hot anger, he left Pharaoh. Imagine him then turning sharply and showing Pharaoh his back. That's not how you leave a king, especially a king who thinks he's a god. You bow down and you face him and you back out of his presence. You don't show him your back. That's customary. To break that custom can result in one's being jailed or executed. You show proper respect. Moses had no respect for Pharaoh. Pharaoh had no respect for Moses as God. The final gauntlet has been thrown down. Verse 9, the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you in order that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go out of his land. That's kind of a summary statement that sort of breaks up the story. We get a lot of that in here, and a lot of repeating, but this one phrase appears in there 15 or 20 times. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. brings us back to Reformation Day. Luther honestly thought, when he wrote up his 95 articles of debate, that scholars would in fact debate with him, and several debates did in fact take place. They took place in Germany. But when word got to Rome what he was doing and how he had interrupted the supply of money flowing to Rome, the Pope himself issued what was known as a papal bull. Leo X, one of the Medicis. The Medicis were the ruling family of Italy. They had the money, they had the power. 4 of the Medicis were popes, 2 of them were kings, 1 was a queen. This was a dynasty. And they didn't take well to being told, we need to debate, we need to examine our practices. A number of the cardinals we know agreed. These are the officials who wait on the Pope, and in the College of Cardinals, Vatican scholars, the chiefs of the church. Many of them agreed and no doubt tried to persuade Pope Leo that some of their practices were indeed questionable. But for the Pope, it wasn't a matter of whether the practices were, it was a matter that this upstart German priest had taken a vow. And the Pope would see this priest bow down, lay his face in the dirt, and apologize, or he would be executed if they could catch him, which they didn't. He died at the age of 63 in the city that he was born in. See you tomorrow, 10 a.m. worship, 9 a.m. Sunday school class, and again we are worshiping in the church and on Zoom simultaneously, hybrid worship. If you are not comfortable being around others, then we invite you to continue worshiping on Zoom. No one's going to be asked to do anything that they aren't completely comfortable with. We do follow all of the guidelines given by the church and by the CDC. We wear masks coming and going. When people are in the pews, they're not wearing their mask while they're passively sitting and worshiping. When they're singing, masks go back on. When they're moving, coming and going, masks go on. The sharing of the peace, there is no movement. We don't get out of the pews. We don't take an offering. We don't get up and go to communion. We have communion. You pick it up on the way in, and you remain in your seat. And at the time, when it's time to receive the body and the blood, you open one side first and the other side next. We are doing it as safe as we know how and as faithful as we know how, trying to walk that middle ground, the middle way. See you tomorrow.